Have you ever had one of those moments where you bet your life that something was a certain way, but when you check, reality doesn't agree? Maybe you swore the Monopoly man had a monocle, or you grew up certain that it was spelled Berenstein, bears, with an E, but that unsettling disconnect between memory and reality is what we call the Mandela effect. It is one of the strangest collective phenomena of our time, where huge groups of people remember the same thing incorrectly, and it doesn't just make us scratch our heads, it makes us question the very nature of reality. In this video, we're going to break down the Mandela effect into three big parts. Number one, famous examples of these false memories that just about everybody knows. The question of whether or not it is actual proof that alternate realities exist. And finally, why the Mandela effect feels so convincing and why our brain clings to these false memories as if they are truth. Famous examples of false memories. Let's go. The Mandela effect got its name from Nelson Mandela, the former president of South Africa. Many people, especially in the late 2000s, were stunned when they learned that he had passed away in 2013 because they were sure they remembered him dying decades earlier in prison. Some even vividly recall news broadcasts, funerals, and tributes that never actually happened. The mass false memory gave birth to the term. But Mandela isn't the only one. In fact, the Mandela effect has been fueled by dozens of cultural examples where people across the world share the same wrong memory. Let's look at some of the most famous ones. The Berenstain Bears. This is a classic example. Millions of people grew up reading children's books about the bear family. Most of them remember the title being spelled Berenstein with an EIN at the end. But when you check the books, it's not. It's spelled with an AIN at the end. For some reason, this tiny detail has caused endless debates. People are swearing that reality itself shifted because of these books. Looney Tunes versus Looney Tunes. So TUNES versus TOONS. Most remember the zany Warner Bros. Cartoons being called Looney Tunes, TOONS, as in cartoons, but no, it's tunes as in TUNES, spelled like musical tunes. And even if you've seen the logo hundreds of times, the memory feels slippery. This one really bothers me, honestly. The Monopoly man, if you were to picture the Monopoly mascot right now, chances are you describe him as wearing a monocle, but that never happened. He doesn't have one. The monocle is just a collective misremembering, probably confused with Mr. Peanut, simply because a rich man in a suit feels like he should have one, which is a fair point. They should give him one. The Fruit of the Loom logo. For decades, people remembered the logo having a cornucopia behind the fruit, but look it up, never had one. The fruit just sits there plain and simple. Luke, I am your father. One of the most famous movie misquotes in history comes from Star Wars. Most people think Darth Vader says, Luke, I am your father, but the actual line is, no, I am your father. The fact that the misquote is so widespread has cemented it as an example of the Mandela effect. Mirror, mirror on the wall. If you ask anybody about Snow White, they'll probably quote, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? But in the original Disney movie, the line is magic mirror on the wall. Another subtle difference that feels jarring when you find out. Other examples, and there are countless others. Febreze is spelled with one E in the middle, not two. Pikachu's tail has no black tip. Oscar Mayer is spelled with an A, not an E. It's Mayer, not Mayer. M-A-Y-E-R, not M-E-Y-E-R. Curious George doesn't have a tail, and Kit Kat has no dash in the middle. And the sheer volume of these examples makes it more than just a case of a few people being forgetful. It's systematic. The whole swaths of our memory have been edited. Number two, is this proof of alternate realities? This is where things get interesting, because if so many people misremember the same exact details, it raises a question. Are we, just as people, all collectively bad at remembering things, or is something deeper going on? For many people, the Mandela effect is compelling evidence of alternate realities, parallel universes, or even glitches in the fabric of space and time. The theory goes like this. At some point in history, we might have shifted timelines. In one timeline, Nelson Mandela did die in prison in the 80s. In another, he lived and became president of South Africa. In one reality, the books were spelled EIN for Berenstain Bears, and in ours, they're AIN. The idea was supercharged by the rise of online communities where thousands of people could gather, compare memories. Suddenly, individuals who thought they were alone in their confusion discovered that millions of others remembered the same exact thing and it kind of felt like proof. Quantum physics and the multiverse. Some enthusiasts point to the concepts from quantum physics like the many worlds interpretation, which suggests that every possible outcome of every event exists in its own branching universe. And if that's true, maybe the Mandela effect is just catching glimpses of these other branches, or even shifting between them without realizing it. Some people think it's a glitch in the matrix. Others frame it as that, similar to the simulation hypothesis. If reality is kind of a simulation, then maybe these inconsistencies are just errors in the code, small bugs that reveal the underlying structure. And, of course, I gotta give you a skeptical counterpoint here. Scientists and skeptics have much simpler explanations. They argue that our brains are not perfect recorders of reality. Memory is reconstructive and not photographic for a large majority of us. Each time you recall something, you rebuild the memory and tiny errors creep in. Combine that with cultural reinforcement, like a misquote being repeated over and over, and suddenly millions of people share the same false memory. Psychologists also point out that the alternate reality explanation is a bit of a leap. It's much more likely that our memories errors are the result of cognitive bias, social influence, and the way our brains process the information. Still, the alternate theory remains popular, not because it's scientifically proven, but because it resonates with how strange the Mandela effect feels. When you've lived your whole life believing something with total confidence, and suddenly the world tells you that you're wrong, it almost feels easier to believe in a parallel universe than admit that your brain tricked you. Part 3. Why the Mandela effect feels so convincing. Here's the real question. Why does it feel real? Why are people so convinced that their memory is accurate, even when shown hard evidence to the contrary? First, power of memory. Let's understand how memory works. Most people assume memory is like a video camera. We record events, store them, and replay them later. But in reality, memory is more like a reconstruction process, like we talked about. Every time you recall a memory, your brain pieces it together from fragments influenced by context, emotion, or even social suggestion. Over time, those reconstructions drift further and further from the original truth. 2. The role of expectation. Our brain loves patterns. If something should be a certain way, our memory will often edit it to fit that expectation. For example, Looney Tunes. It just makes sense because they're fucking cartoons. The Monopoly Man should have a monocle because he's a rich caricature. The Berenstain Bears should be spelled Stein because we're more familiar with names ending that way. Our brains fill in the gap to match the pattern that we expect. Number 3, social reinforcement. Memory isn't just personal, it's social. When everyone around you misremembers the same thing, it strengthens your own false memory. If every kid on the playground called them Berenstain Bears, then the spelling becomes locked in your brain. When the collective culture repeats a misquote like Luke, I am your father, it cements the error across generations. Number 4, the confidence trap. Another psychological factor is how confident we feel about our memories. Even when memories are false, people often recall them with absolute certainty. That confidence makes the Mandela effect feel undeniable. It's not just a vague recollection, it's vivid, detailed, and emotionally driven. That intensity tricks us into believing that it must be true. Now, why is it hard to let it go? Finally, there's the emotional side. Our memory conflicts with reality. It feels like reality itself is betraying us, and that's unsettling. The Mandela effect forces us to confront the fragility of memory, and instead of accepting that our brains are flawed, many of us prefer explanations that preserve the sense that we were right all along. Whether that's alternate realities, glitches in the matrix, or parallel universes, the Mandela effect is one of those rare cultural phenomena that blends psychology, science fiction, and human curiosity in one strange but fascinating mystery. On one hand, it's a powerful example of how unreliable our memory actually is, and how easily groups of people can collectively misremember details. On the other hand, it does spark the imagination, because what if, just maybe, it really is the evidence of alternate timelines? At the end of the day, whether you see it as a quirk of a memory or a glimpse into the multiverse, the Mandela effect teaches us something profound. Reality isn't as always solid as we think. Our perception of the world is fragile, flexible, and sometimes straight up wrong. So next time you catch yourself saying, Luke, I am your father, or looking for Pikachu's missing tail stripe, remember, you're not alone. The Pikachu one really fucks with me. And maybe, just maybe, you're remembering a reality that you once lived in. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys next one. Peace out.